Hey everybody, Dr. G here. I'm a clinical and forensic psychologist as well as a body language expert, and today we're going to be analyzing the behavior and body language of John Wayne Gacy. John Wayne Gacy is one of America's most prolific serial killers with at least 33 victims. Before we get started with this analysis, I do want to remind you to like and subscribe if you want to see more content just like this. All right, let's go. John Wayne Gacy was not known for doing interviews. We're going to be analyzing one of the few that exist. What we're going to be doing over the next few weeks is analyzing a number of different serial killer interviews, so stay tuned for all of that. Let's just jump right in.
After so many years of silence, never having a media interview, and people have said that you have given them interviews in your...
Well, that's hogwash.
Yeah.
That's strictly hogwash.
So we're saying
I'm constantly told that I'm misquoted constantly, saying that I said this and I said that, and it's not happened.
So you're already noticing he talks with his hands, he shakes his head. Emotionally, he is connected to what he's saying. He's a very effective liar. We're going to talk about this as we keep going.
That I said this and I said that, and it's not happened.
So it's pretty well established on this. This is the first time you're speaking publicly about your case.
Right.
Yeah.
I've always felt that my attorneys were handling it, and they said to keep a low profile and stay away from it. And in light of all that has been used against me in the media, they've created this fantasy monster image, and it's been going on for the last 12 years. And I've ever had no comment, and I had no need to talk to the media for the simple reason that they were looking for sensationalism and they were looking for the monster.
When you say fantasy monster image, what?
So he is very aware of how he's coming across. Now you hear him saying all of these things, and he looks at the camera. Watch this right here. This is something that we look for in trials all the time.
That they were looking for sensationalism and they were looking...
So as he's talking about looking for sensationalism, looking for the monster, he recognizes he's performing right now. And as he's talking about this, as he's trying to convince people, I've never talked to the media before, I've never talked about these things. He's going to be getting into more of that as we go. He knows there's an audience. So you have to think about the fact that this is a performance. Almost every time you see a serial killer interview, there's an element of performance with it. The question becomes, what are they trying to perform for? What is it that they want to accomplish in this? Do they just enjoy lying? Are they trying to convince people of something? What's the purpose there? Hopefully we'll understand that better as we continue through this interview.
Had no comment, and I had no need to talk to the media for the simple reason that they were looking for sensationalism and they were looking for the monster.
When you say fantasy monster image, what are you referring to by that?
Well,
now you see him bunching his lips, licking his lips. This means that there's some emotion that's starting to pump through him. There's adrenaline going through him right now. So he either is getting excited because he's lying, or maybe the subject matter is making him feel something. But now we're starting to see an actual physiological reaction.
The monster.
When you say fantasy monster image, what are you referring to by that?
Well, the idea that I'm a homosexual thrill killer.
Now look at his brow right there, talking about being a homosexual thrill killer. Something about that makes him angry. I don't know if it's the homosexual part or if it's the idea that he's been deemed in the media as a serial killer and all this, and that makes him feel out of control. There could be a number of reasons, but we are seeing genuine anger right here.
Referring to by that?
Well, the idea that I'm a homosexual thrill killer and all that garbage, and they painted this image of me that like I strolled down the streets and stalked young boys and slaughtered them. Hell, if you could see my schedule, my work schedule, you know damn well that I was never out there.
Now, if you look at his facial expressions, what he's saying, his body language, it's actually fairly effective. He is a very, very good liar. He's shaking his head when he needs to. He smiles when he needs to. He's got good social skills, which is not true of all serial killers. It makes it more complicated, but not impossible to read. Just understand, he's going to lie very effectively, and there are times where he's not going to show any overt body language that he's lying. Because emotion and body language are connected. And if you are enough of a psychopath, you can have a lot of control over that. Not 100%, but a lot more than your average person.
Slaughtered them. Hell, if you could see my schedule, my work schedule, you know damn well that I was never out there.
Well,
Now, I'm going to show you one other thing very briefly. Watch the corner of his mouth right here.
Hell, if you could see my schedule, my work schedule, you know damn well that I was never out there.
You see the corner of his mouth right here. It jumped up a little bit, and we associate that with contempt. So when someone's feeling contemptuous, that tends to be the only emotion we see on just one side of the body. So as he's talking to this interview, he's starting to feel contempt about it as he's saying these lies. Maybe because he knows that he's not being believed, or maybe he imagines that he's not being fully believed. He feels contempt already, even saying these things, even if he is a convincing liar.
I strolled down the streets and stalked young boys and slaughtered them. Hell, if you could see my schedule, my work schedule, you know damn well that I was never out there.
Well, you were indicted, convicted, and sentenced on 33 counts of homicide. Is that correct?
That's correct.
Fix that.
Yeah.
Something else you'll notice with him is that occasionally he looks away.
There.
Well, you were indicted, convicted, and sentenced on 33 counts of
Now, the important part about that is not that he's looking away at that time. The important part is that's a natural thing that most of us do. And oftentimes serial killers don't do that. Oftentimes they stare at people and they will stare them down and they will keep their eyes open for unusually long periods of time. They will blink less. He's doing less of that because he knows it's socially appropriate to look away. He's performing. You see less of this. A lot of serial killers have less awareness than he does about these things. So sometimes when you see him look away or look around, it almost feels a little unnatural because it probably is. He's probably forcing himself to do that because he knows that will make him look more normal.
Yeah, I was going to ask you, insofar as sound goes, if I'm down with my head, does that hurt your sound quality?
No, it's okay. Just try not to move around too much.
So this is part of being manipulative. It's trying to do that give and take, trying to seem as normal as possible, trying to show that he's thoughtful about the sound quality and all these things. This would be sort of an outtake. Obviously not what he would expect to be part of the interview, but as he's communicating with people, as he's talking to them, you can see that persuasive nature. He seems very much like a car salesman. That just tends to be the kind of vibe that he gives off. You wouldn't, I don't think, honestly, meet this guy and first think serial killer.
Please. If you break into song, give him a cue.
No, I ain't going to break into any song. We'll go.
Right, so there he is joking along with people. Another thing that some serial killers are not very good at.
Go into the lead-in as you know, you were at 1978.
Yeah.
You were present.
Yeah. Okay, that's the way I'd like to start, and I'd like to kind of go.
What do you got there? Let's see your list.
I just like to go through the generalities, maybe talk about the background of the thing, the original case.
So he's wanting control. He's asking to see the list. He's wanting to be a part of things. This is someone who needs absolute control. Now, that is true of most serial killers, but certainly true of John Wayne Gacy. And so anytime that he is able to even just a tiny bit of control, he's certainly going to try. I mean, even if you look at something like his hair, it's very well kept. Whereas you look at somebody like the Night Stalker, who's much more erratic, his hair's all over the place. He's a bit of a mess. So what we look like on the outside very much represents how we want people to see us. And he wants to be seen as someone who's in absolute control.
Bleeping of the language, I will watch the language.
Yeah, he's going to try. John does tend to slip into...
Well, I call it as I see it.
So right now you're seeing some genuine emotion. When you look at what's a performance versus what's real, this seems to be him actually smiling. This seems to be something he genuinely finds funny, which is not the case of many of the other parts we see here. We don't see much authentic emotion. I do think right there you saw authentic emotion from John Wayne Gacy.
John does tend
That right there, the squinted eyes, the way his smile looks, that all seems to be very legitimate.
to slip into...
Well, I call it as I see it. Some people can't understand that.
Now, give me kind of just an overview of the business that you eventually established, the construction work. Is this self-taught then, the construction and maintenance work?
I started doing painting, and then I started doing wallpapering and decorating. And inside of 3 years, PDM, which is painting, decorating, and maintenance, was doing $1 million a year.
And that was...
So I don't know his history well enough to know if what he's saying is accurate. I presume it probably is. However, there's danger in that. With somebody like John Wayne Gacy, he will lie just to lie. He lies constantly. So is what he's saying true? Maybe. But you can't assume anything he's saying is true just because he's saying it normally and casually, and because it would be normal to answer a question like this with honesty. He's somebody that is very, very slippery, and he lies constantly.
I only had 4 employees.
And that was the business you were in at the time of the arrest.
That's correct. PDM in 1974 became a corporation, and then I owned PDM Contractors Corporation. I owned PDM Plumbing, PDM Concrete, and PDM Decorating.
Mm-hmm.
And then I branched off with another partner into Rafco Construction.
Mm-hmm.
And from there, we were doing strictly drugstores.
Mm-hmm.
John?
Now, they did not search the house at that time or look through the house?
No. According afterwards.
So I talked about the eyes darting around a little bit earlier. Watch this right here.
Look through the house?
No. According.
So as he's looking away from the interviewer, glancing away, oftentimes if we do that as your average person, we do it because we feel a little bit of discomfort, because that's the natural thing to do. For him, he's probably having to force himself to do that because he knows that's the socially appropriate thing to do, but he probably doesn't feel the need to do that. You can tell there's things that look slightly unnatural with these subtle behaviors that otherwise would be very normal.
Afterwards, they're claiming that they came to the front door of the house and knocked on the door and that I hid from them.
Why didn't you let them in at that time when they were knocking at the front door?
There was no way I could have heard them. I was way in the back of the house, in the rec room, on the telephone. When they finally walked around the side of the house, I could look out the picture window, see them there, because I was on the phone, and they could see me clearly too, sitting on the couch on the telephone, because I was talking to my sister. And
you see, he's saying it so plainly. His body language is actually pretty good right here. And so you might assume that what he's saying is true, but you really shouldn't. You should not assume that anything he says is true. But it's very hard to distinguish the parts that are specifically lies versus what is true, because he's so good at lying, and he lies so much.
In regards to a death in our family. So I told her that I would call her back, got up, went to the door, and he introduced himself as cousin Zach and Piquel, and they wanted to come in and talk to me about Robert Peace.
Now look at his head position right here. He's got his chin up. He's exposing his neck. Now our neck is very vulnerable. That's not something you want to expose to somebody you see as a threat. So him doing that, he's trying to show the interviewer, I don't see you as a threat. There's nothing about you that scares me. And so little positions like this clue us in on what's going on inside with him.
And they wanted to come in and talk to me about Robert Peace. And I had told him that I had not had any conversation with him, but I said, if you want to talk to me, then come back there. And they wanted me to come down.
So look at the lip lick after this.
Talk to me, then come back there.
So as he's telling what are probably lies, he's sitting and licking his lips afterward. There's excitement in that. So he doesn't feel anxious lying. He enjoys lying. There's fun in it. It helps him see people as marks. It helps him feel in control. So when you see him lick his lips after talking sometimes, it's probably because there were some lies included in there, if not all lies, and that excites him.
They held me there for 9 hours, and while holding me there for 9 hours, they executed a search warrant. The first search warrant was executed on December 13th. That is the search warrant where they claim they went through the house looking for...
To go back to the chin, look how much he's exposing his neck right now. You'll see interviews with other serial killers that keep their chin very low. They might feel vulnerable in a situation like this. John Wayne Gacy doesn't at all. He's very predatorial, and so something like this, showing people that he feels comfortable, showing himself as being wide open, is going to make him feel very powerful and in control.
For Robert Peace. It was written up to be looking for Robert Peace, and Robert Peace wasn't there.
The police had focused in on you as being the suspect in the missing boy, and eventually...
well, they were following me around.
Following you?
Yeah, constantly. And on December 13th, I had made a statement to the police department, and from that date forward, they had me under surveillance. The only trouble is that the Mickey Mouse way they were doing it, they had 2 cars following me day and night, and they had trouble keeping up with me, so I used to go out to the car in the morning and tell them where I was going, so in case they got...
See, what he's doing right now is showing how much control he has, not only describing them as a Mickey Mouse way of doing it, he's saying, I was in such control of everything going on, I would tell them where I was going. All of this is to set up the idea that he's been unjustly put in prison, and that none of this is because he messed up or because he slipped up. He's in full control. How could that possibly happen? And he wants people to know how much control he has, even over the police.
Doing it. They had 2 cars following me day and night, and they had trouble keeping up with me, so I used to go out to the car in the morning and tell them where I was going, so in case they got lost. Because at the time I was doing 5 construction jobs.
And he's sneaking in small smiles there. I don't think those are real. I think that's an attempt. That's a performance. That's to make people think, look how smart I am. Look how happy I am about this. Look how ridiculous these police officers are.
In 5 parts of the city. So in essence, I was all over the place. But this was like Keystone Cops trying to follow me around.
There's that one photograph of you and Rosalind Carter.
Yeah, Mrs. Rosalind Carter. Well, the Secret Service tries to cover it up and said, well, we don't know how he got into the picture. Hell, I was in charge of the reception. I had to stand at the door and let them know which politicians were allowed in and which ones weren't.
Something like that, for example, you should not take at face value. what politicians should be allowed in and what who shouldn't be. Maybe that sounds like a reasonable thing, but to him, that's a control fantasy. I was the one that was in charge of all these things. I was so important. Maybe that's true, but it's very, very possible that that is also not true.
Thing of it is, but the Secret Service wanted to cover up and make it sound like that I had no business there. I was cleared, and I was with the Secret Service at the time and setting up the parade route and everything, because I used to set up the parades for the Polish Alliance. And then for 3 years in a row, I had set up the parades to run.
Now, you'll notice the furrowed brow. Now, it's not unusual at all that people have a furrowed brow. I do that myself oftentimes. However, something you don't see very often is him raising his eyebrows to bring attention to his face. Because when we were talking, we raise our eyebrows. We want people to pay attention to what we're saying and how we look. He doesn't do that very often, probably because he knows how much he's lying, and unconsciously his brain is not putting his eyebrows up to bring attention to himself, because there's a part of him that still wants to hide, because this is a performance. He knows he's performing. So his unconscious mind does inhibit certain behaviors that we would normally see.
The subdivision where the Summerdale house is located is built on a clay field. And when it rained, the rain would come down from both ends and would flood from one house to the other. The crawl space would fill up with water. In 1976, I asked a landscaper, I said, what do you do for that sour odor of clay? And he said, spread white lime, just regular masonry lime. On the ground, he said it'll sweeten up the clay and you won't have that odor. It's sort of.
Watch his hands. He's talking a lot with his hands right now. He also happens to be throwing some lies in there too, and this is what starts to get complicated. When people talk with their hands, we oftentimes see them as being more truthful. That just unconsciously is the way that we perceive it. Because when our hands are open, our body's open, we're more vulnerable, and when we're more vulnerable, we're more comfortable. And typically, if people are that comfortable, they're not as likely to be lying. However, he can talk with his hands, he can be very open and be lying and seem perfectly comfortable doing it.
That's why the lime was spread in the crawl space.
How much lime was spread down there eventually?
I think 700 or 800 pounds of it. The first search warrant was executed on December 13th. However, what is strange is you had 20 trained officers that came into that house, supposedly went down in the crawl space, crawled around. There was no mounds of dirt. There was no odor. There was no nothing. I never feared anybody.
See, now, that was a time that he did actually use his eyebrows. Watch this.
There was no mounds of dirt. There was no odor. There was no nothing.
Now you actually are seeing him raise his eyebrows a little bit as he's talking, which means he's getting more confident with his lies, that his unconscious mind is allowing him to raise his eyebrows because he's getting more invested in the performance. He believes he's doing a good job with his performance. So the more naturally he's seeming, the more he thinks his performance is really working.
On a historical note, your Iowa conviction goes back to what year was that?
1968.
68. And what was just...
So I mentioned contempt earlier. Watch this.
Goes back to what year was that?
1968.
That right there is the prototype of a contemptuous look. Probably because he doesn't want this case being brought up. Makes him feel out of control. He gets angry when he hears this.
68. And what was, just in a nutshell, without getting in too deeply, what was the basis of the Iowa conviction?
The basis of it was a sodomy conviction. It's the only thing I ever was sentenced to was a sodomy conviction. They're claiming that the state representative's son.
This is a case that obviously he doesn't want to talk about. That's why you saw the contempt come up. So now as he's talking about it, watch his eyes right here.
The basis of it was a sodomy conviction. It's the only thing I ever was.
So now you're seeing him squint his eyes. We oftentimes do this when we're seeing things that we don't like or when we're thinking about things we don't like. This is a situation he doesn't particularly want to talk about, I don't think. And obviously he'll just lie his way through it as he does everything. But this is something he would probably prefer to avoid.
Sentenced to was a sodomy conviction. They're claiming that the state representative's son, who was on the other party, he claims that he was sexually abused by me. And in essence, he was blackmailing me for it. Now, what it boiled down to was oral copulation.
The media has called you a homosexual killer. What is your position on homosexuality?
I have nothing against it. I'm an outspoken liberal. I don't care for the labeling. I don't care for any labeling for that fact.
Do you claim to be
So this is a fake smile that he uses oftentimes.
The labeling. I don't care for any.
He does have enough awareness to know that smiling at people can help you manipulate them. So he uses this a lot. Now you can tell it's not a real smile. There's no wrinkles next to his eyes. the way that he uses this is to be purely manipulative. So you got to keep an eye out that when he's doing this, he's really trying to put the charm on. And I think it probably works for some people. Obviously not with the interviewer, because the interviewer is a retired FBI agent. But for the way that he's interacted with people, this is probably something he's very used to doing.
Now, when the search warrants were effected in your case, they did find an awful lot in the crawl space of your home, did they not?
Well, yeah, I had offered to sell him the house because I thought there was nothing down in the crawl space.
Yeah.
I had never had any qualms about him going down in the crawl space.
Well,
part of what makes John Wayne Gacy so slippery is that he can be asked something very directly, and his lie was actually pretty good. His body language was right as he was lying, the way he was shaking his head, so on and so forth. And this is the challenge with psychopaths and serial killers, is that they are capable of being effective liars in ways that most people aren't. Now, one thing he didn't do, which I would have expected, I would have thought he would raise his eyebrows a little bit to bring attention to what he's saying, which he didn't do. So there's subtle things like that you're going to look at. But overall, his performance is actually pretty good.
Nothing down in the crawl space.
Yeah.
I had never had any qualms about him going down in the crawl space.
Well, how many bodies
Didn't
were
raise any
actually
notice.
located on the property, and where?
To my understanding,
Now, there comes the lip licking again. And this is something that he tends to show after a big lie. So those subtle bits of body language you can see, but during the lie itself, there wasn't much to see.
crawl space.
Well, how many bodies
Didn't
were
raise any
actually
notice.
located on the property, and where?
To my understanding, there was a total of 29 bodies or 28 bodies were found on the property. 27 of them under the house.
And the rest?
So he's using imprecise numbers even though he knows better. And that's something that he does to try to be a more convincing liar. Because, and this is actually true, being 100% certain about things makes people less convincing. Usually when you go, it's about this, it's about that, they're more believable. So being a compulsive liar, and a very compulsive liar at that, he's somebody that knows how to lie well. So when he says this, you can't trust that he doesn't actually know. He's using that approximation to be more believable.
My understanding, there was a total of 29 bodies or 28 bodies were found on the property. 27 of them under the house.
And the rest?
One was under the driveway, one was under the garage. So that makes a total of 29.
Okay. Now,
See, he knew it was 29 the whole time, but then he started to hedge his bets a little bit because he's a really good liar.
the standpoint of the arrest, when you were arrested in this matter, this was...
And there was the lip lick afterward. Like I said, watch for that after big lies. He lies pretty much constantly, but after big ones, that's when you see it.
Now, from the standpoint of the arrest, when you were arrested in this matter, this
It
was...
snowballed.
It snowballed. Okay, what was the date of that arrest, do you recall?
December 22nd, 1978 is when I was arrested.
See, it's details like that. He is very precise. He is very knowledgeable. He's probably a pretty smart guy. So whenever he doesn't know a detail or whenever he can't quite remember it, it's fair to assume that it's a lie or a manipulation in some way.
Okay.
There was no big special deal on
Yeah.
it. I couldn't get down in the crawl space that easy, and then I had to bum back to begin with. You got to crawl on your belly to move around in the crawl space. There is no way that I could have done any of the digging down there. I had enough trouble just getting down there.
There was that laugh and that smile again.
That I could have done any of the digging down there. I had enough trouble.
Once again, he knows that this is something that draws people in. He knows that it's probably why he did all that clowning stuff. He knows that smiling at people can be used against them. It is a masterfully manipulative tool for people that can use it like that.
Trouble just getting down there. Gregory Godsick, let's see, number 4. Gregory Godsick had come to work for me.
Now, something he's going to absolutely love is getting to go through these papers, getting to go through things and explain what's going on. Even if he's making up lies as he's doing it, it's going to make him feel important. You can see that he's very dramatic when it comes to the way that he shuffles through papers, the way he moves things around. He does tend to seem to really enjoy this aspect of his performance.
Let's see, number 4. Gregory Godsick had come to work for me in according to this, 1976.
A number of, 3 or 4 psychologists interviewed
I
you.
had 13 of them. There was 6 for the defense and 7 for the state.
Yeah, what was the
state
position
doctor-
of the defense psychiatrist? What did they feel your problem was? What did they come up with from the standpoint?
There's that contempt again. asking what his problem is.
What did they feel your problem was? What did they come
You're going to see this come up over and over again during certain questions.
up with from the standpoint of
what the hell is it? God, I can't remember offhand. Borderline personality, antisocial behavior. I don't see how anybody can be antisocial when you were involved with the public as much as I was.
So then he says antisocial, smiling while he says it because he wants you to believe so much. How could I possibly be antisocial? I'm somebody who's likable and charming.
I don't see how anybody can be antisocial.
And when they say, he said borderline with antisocial features or whatever it is that the diagnosis is, borderline personality disorder, antisocial personality disorder, these actually seem like they're probably accurate. So what he's repeating right now is very likely what the psychologist or psychiatrist came to. And I would say, being a personality disorder expert, I wouldn't be surprised at all if those in fact were accurate diagnoses for him.
When you were involved with the public as much as I was.
How about the multiple personality issue?
Oh, the multiple personality came out of Dr. Reifman and Hartman. These two clowns from the Cook County there.
What I find fascinating is that he loves clowning, to use his term. He loves being a clown, and yet he does use it as an insult, because, and most of us would use it as an insult to call somebody a clown, but I find it fascinating that he identifies as a clown, but also uses it as a way to insult people that he thinks are ridiculous or stupid or whatever it is. And to his point, he doesn't have multiple personalities. I'm not sure that was truly claimed. It sounds like, based on what the interviewer is saying, it was, but there's nothing about John Wayne Gacy that seems like somebody that in fact has dissociative identities or any of that kind of stuff. That's way off base.
Two clowns from the Cook County there. They came to see me the first time. I said, "Do you want to talk to John Wayne Gacy, the politician, the clown, the family man, or the businessman?" The next day, I see it in the newspaper. Gacy has 4 personalities. I think one of the headlines said I was a homosexual mass murderer, confessed mass murderer.
There he goes again. When he's talking about the homosexual piece of it, he's saying it very quietly. He's obviously talked about different encounters that he's had. He's been public about the fact that he considers himself bisexual, but there's something about that actual term that does seem to have an effect on him.
Personalities. I think one of the headlines said I was a homosexual mass murderer.
You see here, he got kind of quiet there. He also moved his neck down into a more defensive posture very briefly, which is so unusual for him.
Gacy has 4 personalities. I think one of the headlines said I was a homosexual mass murderer, confessed mass murder. There is no confession, and we offered. I offered as much as $10,000 if you can produce a confession where I confess to a crime. The time that I was interrogated by the police officers, there was no stenographer, there was no tape recording, there was no videotaping. Nothing was ever taken down yet.
Now, this is a fact that he does want you to know. There was no videotaping. That may be true.
Tape recording, there was no video.
So when he's saying things that are factually possibly true, you will see the eyebrows go up more with him. So he does have that capacity. He does have that tendency like all of us do. And so when you see that he keeps his brow furrowed, he is hiding his true feelings at times.
Taping. Nothing was ever taken down, yet everywhere you'll see there's 5 confessions by John Wayne Gacy. Now, if I confess to something, then why wasn't it videotaped? Why wasn't it recorded? Why wasn't a stenographer brought in, had it written up, and have me sign it? There is no confessions in this case. Tim McCoy's name wasn't put on him until 1988. Prior to that, he was known as Unknown Number 9, and he was buried by me in the crawl space. That's the only knowledge that I have of it.
What was the circumstances of that?
He was killed in the house in self-defense.
And who killed him then?
I stabbed him.
Yeah, and it was an issue of self-defense. Why was he in the process of assaulting you, or what?
He was coming at me with a knife. I just took the knife away and twisted it in his hand, and that's what killed him.
Finally confessing to and acknowledging someone that he murdered. Obviously, the context is complete nonsense, but it's interesting to see him talk about it. Let's go through and look at the facial expressions and the body language.
And who killed him then?
I stabbed him.
Yeah.
See, the eyebrows go up when he's saying, I stabbed him. That does seem to actually be quite true.
And it was an issue of self-defense. Why was he in the process of assaulting you, or what?
He was coming at me with a knife.
See, he said he was coming at me with a knife and nodded afterwards. Now, This is something that is going to have more feeling for him. So he's not lying actually quite as well as he normally does. Watch this right here.
Why was he in the process of assaulting you, or what?
He was coming at me with a knife.
So he said he was coming out with me with a knife and then nodded afterwards. Typically, if it's something that you feel very strongly, you'll be nodding at the same time that you're saying it. So it tends to be more of a performance thing when people show the behavior after feeling the emotion. They should come at the same time.
I just took the knife away and twisted it in his hand, and that's what killed him.
So at that point, you yourself did bury him then in the crawl space.
Right, and if you notice, he's under concrete.
Did you bury any of the others in the crawl space?
No, I had nothing. I had no knowledge of them.
Yeah.
See, the hands right here open like this, appearing vulnerable. It's a pretty solid lie. Obviously, we know it's not true, but the way that he's expressing it, the body language there shows that he is, once again, as I've said many times, a very, very good liar.
Well, why is it that your first one is there and then 20 some others are buried down there as well? Did somebody know that you had done this with the first one, that giving them an idea?
More than likely when drinking and getting high with the others, yeah.
So this is obviously a pretty terrible lie, a ridiculous lie. He doesn't mind doing it because he just can't resist but lie about everything, and he's going to maintain his innocence. But now his body language is shifting a little bit. I want you to notice how much less he's moving.
Your first one is there, and then 20 some others are buried down there as well. Did somebody know that you had done this with the first one, that giving them an idea?
More than likely when drinking and getting high with the others, yeah.
Admitting it to it.
See, getting a little bit quieter. The only thing he's doing is nodding his head, not moving his body, sitting very still. We oftentimes do this when we're trying to hide. So we hit freeze, flight, or fight. The freeze response can be very strong, even for serial killers, because the logic here is ridiculous. He has to know how ridiculous he sounds right now, but he's going to lie anyway. And as he says this lie that he is in less control of because he has this retired FBI agent asking him questions, it's going to make him feel less confident. Now he's moving less.
To them. So you feel others then followed your suit in using this as a burial ground?
Without a doubt.
Yeah.
All right, we'll go ahead and stop here. Hopefully this is giving you a better idea of how Gacy behaves and what his body language is like. He's a really, really challenging one because he is a compulsive liar. He lies constantly. I wouldn't be shocked if only 2% of everything that he said during this interview was purely factual. So much is either going to be embellished or outright lies. And what we see is that the body language leaks out a little bit. There are times where he seems to get excited. He licks his lips. There's times where he's slightly defensive, but generally speaking, he's a very challenging person to read. And people like this who are highly manipulative are very, very good at lying. We're going to be continuing with this series on serial killers. If there's anyone specific that you want to see, let me know in the comments below. I already have a list of people I plan to analyze, but if there's other ones that I haven't thought of, I would love to get some suggestions. Last thing before we get finished up is I do want to remind you to like and subscribe if you want to see more content just like this. All right, thanks for watching.